100 years ago, this city had money, factories, and more millionaires per person than almost anywhere on Earth. Today, entire blocks of it sit empty, houses you could buy for the price of a used car. Meanwhile, a few hundred miles away, a city nobody cared about a generation ago is now one of the most expensive places to live in the country. Same era, completely different fate. So what actually decides whether a city booms or quietly dies? We tend to think of cities like they're permanent, like they've just always been there, doing their thing. But cities are more fragile than they look. Every city exists for a reason, and when that reason disappears, the city doesn't just pause, it can start to unravel. Let's break down what actually makes a city boom, why growth tends to feed itself, and the one thing that decides whether a struggling city bounces back or never does. No city grows by accident. Every one of them started because of some specific advantage: a river for trade, a port for shipping, coal and iron nearby, a rail line, a factory that needed thousands of workers. That single advantage pulls in people. People need houses, so builders show up. People need food, so shops open. Shops need workers, so more people move in. It snowballs. A city isn't really a place. It's a machine built around one original reason for being there. And for a long time, that machine runs beautifully. Here's the part that surprises people. Success in a city doesn't just add up, it multiplies. Economists call this agglomeration. When similar businesses and skilled workers cluster together, everyone gets more productive, not just individually, but as a group. Put 100 tech companies in one place, and workers can switch jobs without switching cities. Ideas spread faster over coffee than over email, and investors know exactly where to look for their next bet. That's why Silicon Valley isn't just about one company, it's about density. The same is true for finance clustering in a handful of global cities, or film production clustering in one part of one country. Once a place becomes the place for something, it gets very hard for anywhere else to compete. Success attracts more success, almost automatically. Which is exactly what makes the fall so brutal. If a city's entire identity is built around one industry, and that industry disappears, the machine doesn't slow down gently, it stalls. Factories close, jobs vanish overnight for tens of thousands of people at once. And here's the cruel part. The people with the most skills and the most options leave first, chasing jobs elsewhere. That drains the local economy even further, which pushes property values down, which shrinks the tax base, which means fewer services, worse schools, and less reason for anyone new to move in. It's a downward spiral that feeds itself just as powerfully as growth did, just in reverse. This is the story behind entire regions, now nicknamed the Rust Belt. Cities built almost entirely around manufacturing, steel, or a single dominant employer that lost the one thing they were built around and never fully replaced it. And here's the twist. Losing your original industry doesn't automatically doom a city. Some cities got hit by exactly the same shock and came back stronger. The difference wasn't luck. It was whether the city could reinvent what it was actually good at. Take a city built on steel manufacturing for 100 years. When the steel industry collapsed, it didn't just lose jobs, it lost its entire reason for existing. But instead of staying a steel city with no steel, it slowly rebuilt itself around healthcare, education, and technology, using the same universities and research institutions that had quietly existed there all along. Compare that to cities that lost their one industry and had nothing else underneath it. No universities, no other clusters, nothing to pivot to. Those cities didn't reinvent, they just kept shrinking. The real decider isn't whether a city gets hit by change. Every city eventually does. It's whether there's something else underneath, ready to catch it. So a booming city and a dying one might start from the exact same spot: a river, a factory, a lucky location. What splits their fates decades later is whether that early advantage built something deeper, something that can survive the original reason disappearing. Cities that only ever had one trick eventually run out of road. Cities that quietly built several don't. So what do you think? Is your city living off one industry or several? Tell me below. If this helped it click, subscribe. Every week, Otto breaks down how the world actually works. Next time, why prices never seem to stop rising and what inflation is actually doing to your money. See you then.